Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and here is one of my cards using one of the new picture book wafer dies that Simon released recently that I was like losing my mind over. So I pulled out the picture book Octopus wafer die, and I also pulled out the CZ Design, one of the Love You wafer dies. And I'm just running these through my little sidekick machine using some Neenah Solar White 110 pound cardstock. And I die cut the little octopus, and it die cuts the body with part of the legs and then, or tentacles. And then there's a separate die along the top of it there that die cuts the rest of their legs, so you can layer it, which I just love. And then I die cut the Love You word die, and I just set that aside. I want to sponge my little octopus first, so I have several different colors of Distress Oxide inks. I already did a separate video showing how I store my sponges, and still loving this system. People were asking, like, do I have them in a, color order? No. I was just sticking them in and then labeling them as I was using them. And I've gone ahead and labeled, like, for the new colors that just came out. And it just, right now, I'm okay with that. They don't need to be in a certain order just because I don't even store them in a certain order. I'm grabbing them constantly, so I just toss them wherever they can go. So anyway, for the colors, I'm using Tattered Rose, which is normally not a color I would reach for often, even in the regular Distress ink, but it's just such a really pretty color, and it blends so nicely with purples. There's just something about it. So I started with Tattered Rose, and then I'm blending into Seedless Preserves. And I purposely chose the Neenah cardstock this time because my personal preference a lot of times with sponging with Oxide specifically is the Neenah cardstocks. I still really like Bristol Smooth, but sometimes I find Bristol Smooth cardstock is almost too smooth for the Oxides. And the ink just glides too much on it, and I get a little frustrated. So I find these blend just really, really nicely on just the Neenah Classic Crest, the 80 and the 110 pound. And I get results that I'm really happy with. So that's what I did here. And I have just some scratch paper off to the side where I would kind of wipe off any excess ink before bringing it to my little character here. And I was also using the scrap paper to kind of hold the die cut here in place so that I'm not getting any fingerprints on the sponged areas. So I just went back and forth a couple times, and I'm working on my, glass craft mat from Tim Holtz. And I would just wipe off the ink in between, mostly so I'm not getting it all over my hands, because I tend to do that. And then I took a little bit of black soot oxide ink and just very, very lightly, I'm applying it to kind of the little ends of the tentacles there, kind of letting them blend into the purple. And that Tattered Rose blended into Seedless Preserves, blended into black soot is one, perfect colors in my opinion for an octopus, and two, it's such a pretty color combination. I just love how those colors just blended into each other. So once I was done with my blending, I adhered these together with Simon's Craft Tacky Glue. Now he's got the proper amount of little tentacles, which I just love. And then I have to add some highlights, of course. So I've got my Uniball 10 white gel pen here. And I add kind of a really large highlight to his head just because it's kind of larger. And then I added just little like dots to the ends of the tentacles and just little highlights just to, give this a little more texture and character. So I just add little dots, add little highlights, and then this little guy is going to be good to go. I say this every time I use the picture book character wafer dies. They're so much fun. I like, you can just give them personality with the different colors and adding little elements and everything else. So fun. So added that to this little guy. And then for the actual die cut word, I'm using the same two colors, the Tattered Rose and the Seedless Preserves. Super sped this up. But I left the die cut in the scrap cardstock there because then that can just hold it in place while I do all my sponging. Then I'm going to pop it out of the cardstock here and then sponge a bit more just to kind of cover any little exposed edges of the cardstock just to get like a nice even blend. So after I had done that, I still had more sponging to do. So I pulled out the Tap Dance stencil, and I'm going to tape this onto more Neenah Classic Crest cardstock here, just using some purple tape and taping it from behind. And then I'm going to sponge on a little bit more of the Seedless Preserves. And I'm just going to use a paper towel to wipe off the excess ink. I don't want to use a baby wipe or anything because I don't want to get my cardstock wet underneath. But I just wiped off any of the excess ink with a paper towel. And then I'm just using a little bit of hickory smoke Distress Oxide ink and just kind of blending that around. I wanted to pull in just a little bit of gray into my background because I'm going to use a gray cardstock for my card base. So just kind of sponge that. You kind of have to, with this stencil, because there's such little openings, you kind of have to mush the blending tool. If you're using stencil brushes, that would get in there really well, but I just use my sponges and just kind of press a little heavier to get the color to go through. So I have my cardstock base, like I said, is gray cardstock. It's Simon's Smoke cardstock, and I also used that cardstock to die cut the outline for the Love You. And I'm going to adhere those together again with Simon's Craft Tacky Glue. So I'm going to get those layered into place. And then I am going to add that to my card front in a minute. And after I do that, before I do that, I pulled out some Gina K Plum Punch cardstock. This is from her 2018 add-on collection. This color is like perfect with seedless preserves. So I pulled out a scrap of that, and I am stamping sentiments from the CZ Design Simple Sentiments #1 stamp set with Simon's clear embossing ink. And I'm going to heat emboss these with Simon's white detail embossing powder. So I'd use my anti-sag powder tool first, stamp those sentiments, cover them with the detail white embossing powder, and then I'm going to melt those with my heat tool. Once both of these sentiments are melted, I am going to trim them into little narrow strips just using my Fisker's paper trimmer here. So just get that lined up, and then I can trim these down and cut them apart into 2 separate sentiments. And I purposely chose this one because it's like love you and this cute little, you know, octopus, and then it's going to say, you know, thinking of you, and then on the inside, not in a creeper way. I say this over and over again. I kind of sound like a broken record, but it's still true. I love CZ Designs, like stamps and dies, and like the snarkiness in a lot of them. That is me to a T. I love it. So I like adding those funny little like snarky sayings to things. So I coated the back of that stenciled cardstock with Simon's Big Mama foam tape, the thinner foam tape that I love. So I used that to adhere that to my card base. And then for the sentiment, I wanted to pop it up a bit just to make it stick out a little bit more. So I just pulled out my little Doris narrow foam strips here and kind of worked those around the back of this die cut sentiment, since there are so many openings, and these strips are very flexible if you remove the backing paper from both sides. You can see I just curved it right around that O, no problem. So I just put a bunch of little pieces on the back of that, and then I can pop this onto my card front so it's, you know, popped up with a little bit more dimension. And then for the octopus, I decided to adhere it flat to the front of the card. And then just one of the tentacles kind of, you know, curled up around the sentiment, which was kind of accidental. But then I was like, oh, I really like how that just, you know, seemed to fit perfectly. So I'm going to kind of press him into place. And then once he's in place, I'd adhered the Thinking of You sentiment with another strip of foam tape. Foam tape. And then I pulled out some googly eyes, of course, from my stash. These are the Studio Katia 5mm googly eyes, and I adhered those on the octopus, and that just makes them. To me, I love adding that element to these, you know. You can either do little die cut ones or add the googly ones, and it just makes my day. So I adhered my sentiment to the inside of the card, and then as a final bit of embellishment, I went through my entire stash and I found sequins and colors that went so well with these inks. So I have some Pretty Pink Posh rose gold sequins. And then I have just these random like craft medley ones that are the kind of the right shade of like plum. And then I also have some Pretty Pink Posh. These are some gray ones. I think they're pewter, 4mm pewter. So I kind of sprinkled those throughout my little card front here. And then I'm going to adhere those into place with more of Simon's Craft Tacky Glue. Just picking up the sequins with my little crystal katana, putting down a dab of glue, sticking the sequin onto it. And then once I have all of these adhered in place, that finishes off my card. So that is my card for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. As always, I will have a supply list below the video in the description box, as well as on my blog, which is also linked in the description box. So the supply list and links to everything if you're interested in checking that out. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye!